Hi friends, my name is Jake. Welcome to Canadian Cutting Edge, and I want to begin with saying thank you to all those who showed support on my news video. Well, and it was also a giveaway announcement video where I talked about, I'm trying to get off of prescription opioid painkillers. Your support is very much appreciated. And the vast majority of you just gave encouraging remarks, and I appreciate that very, very much. Now, this knife that we're going to look at today, this is the Civivi CETOS or CETOS. I'm not sure how other people say it because I don't watch other people's reviews. I want to give you my personal opinion, 100% my own opinion when I do my reviews. So I don't watch reviews of knives that I'm going to be reviewing either. You get the full Canadian Cutting Edge review when you watch my channel. This is sort of a dagger kind of blade, a Framelock flipper. It's got some problems. It's got some good things too, but it's got some problems. Come on down to the tabletop and we'll discuss all of it. We'll do a teardown. We'll do complete full measurements, not just regurgitating the measurements that you find on websites and stuff. I do my own measuring from front to end, all of it, using high-end, Mitutoyo vernier caliper is my main tool for measuring. Let's take a good close look at this thing. All right, let's begin with which one did I get. This is the wood version. Basically, this is Babinga. They use a different name for it, a name that we don't use in North America all that much, but the wood's Babinga. There's your flipper tab right there. There's your Framelock lock arm right there. Pocket clip is right side only. And the blade. I'm going to get right at it. The very first problem with this, with no wrist flick whatsoever, that's the problem. And I'm trying as hard as I ever do to deploy this blade. Now, if I loosen this pivot pin enough that there's blade play, let's do that. It's a bit looser. There's definite blade play there now. Let's try it again. It still didn't go. The lock bar arm is either pushing on too tight or the ball bearings aren't all that great or there's some other problem in that pivot area. If I do a little wrist flick, it works just fine. Just doesn't take much. You just have to add a little bit of wrist flick. We're going to tear this apart in just a little while and take a look and figure out what the problem is in here. But the blade first. We've got sort of a dagger kind of blade shape. Got this false edge back here. I know the spine isn't right down the middle, but it's sort of a dagger kind of thing, sort of a spear point kind of blade. Technically, it's still a drop point blade. We've also got a fuller that's part way out, and then the belly comes back, and there's not really a long straight section. It just seems mostly like belly almost all the way. Maybe you can see a little bit of a straight section back here. Got a big choil up here, and that's because it's got a slow plunge. That is the transition from the full thickness to the main bevel where the blade is. That transition's quite gradual, so the sharpness choil has to be that big. It's not really a forward grip, although you can get your finger in there if you're really careful. You can get your finger over and get a more forward grip. Right now, it's not that sharp. That's another problem with it. So it's not that risky to do it, but partway through this video, I will sharpen this knife and tell you how it goes then. Right now, it's not that great for anything except for piercing into soft stuff. Slicing and cutting, it's, okay-ish. It's not terrible. It's because the grind angles suck, and I'll tell you what those are a little bit later. But the blade shape is an efficient blade shape. It should be cutting quite well and slicing fairly well, and certainly piercing quite well. And we'll go through all the other specs of this blade a little bit later on, and after I've sharpened it, I'll tell you how well it cuts then. Now for the handle, we've basically got a bar. It's got a slight curve to it, and we've got a little bit of, a guard here at the end of the handle, and of course the flipper becomes a guard up there. We've got jimping on the spine that comes out nice and far. I like that. I'm glad they decided to put this fuller in there and then put the jimping all the way up to the end of it because, you can reach out far, and if you do choke up, you can still get some grip with your thumb on there. Yeah, I broke my nail right. Handle, yeah. We got nicely softened edges here, nicely rounded over, even on the steel side here. It's nice and soft and round. There's nothing sharp anywhere on the handle. Got lots of room for a big grip. You know, my hands are in the extra large range, just barely, but they are, and there's still extra room back here. So you can have fairly big hands and still be comfortable with this thing. T8 screws like you get with Civivi. Oh, I forgot to say, yes, it's a Civivi, so you get your Civivi pouch and all that comes with that as well. And then it's a Framelock. Now, I don't review a lot of Framelocks because I tend not to be terribly happy with Framelocks, mostly because I'm also left-handed. A right-handed Framelock in a left hand just doesn't work. Since I'm fairly ambidextrous, I do, still do Framelocks every once in a while. I like the cutaway here. First the steel is bigger, like this is bigger than the wood side is. So it's easy to get behind there and disengage the lock. Lockup is great. I really like where it's locked up. Blade alignment, pretty much down the middle. And the pocket clip's got T6 screws, but those T6 screws are, let's test them out here. Get a driver in there. Yeah, there's a bit of play, but they're deep enough that they're okay. If you're careful with them, you probably won't strip them out. But the rest of the screws here are T8s and nice and snug. Hardly any play in them at all. And yeah, very, very nice. I'm very happy with them. And T8s back here. So that's quite good. The flipper tab, it's got jimping up the front and across the top. I initially thought, man, I wish that flipper tab was bigger, but no, it's not. It's not the flipper tab that's to blame. It's something inside that pivot. So let's take it apart and take a look at that. Oh, I'm going to cover one important thing that I forgot to mention before. Bead blast finish. You can also get it in a black stone wash or a black wash, which I would have got if they would have had a black wash with the wood, but I'm kind of a fan of wood, so yeah, I got the bead blast, which is not good on stainless steel. You're asking for corrosion. You really are. It also comes in Damascus, but you get the wood or micarta. All right, and we'll talk about the prices in just a little while. So there's the lock bar arm, and look at that. At rest, hopefully it'll focus up here. At rest, that lock bar arm is not way over. Like, I really doubt that there's too much pressure from this lock bar arm on that blade, and that's stopping it. But I'm gonna just flex it back just a few times just to see if it moves a tiniest bit, just to make it slightly softer. You have to be really careful when you do something like this because you can easily fatigue the spring. Well, it becomes a spring back here, and if you fatigue that, then your lock arm breaks, and then you've got no knife anymore. At least you don't have a locking knife. I think that's moved over tiniest little bit. Anyhow, the finish on here, you can see it scraped a line in there, which is not unusual with any knife, but there's the arc that the detent ball follows. And yeah, there's not much wear on the ball bearing marks here on the blade, not like there is on there. So I really think that the detent ball is pushing onto the side of the blade too much for me to get the good flipping action. That said, I didn't feel like the detent was too strong. It certainly wasn't too weak. I should have shown it to you. I'm going to put it back together and show it to you once I've put it back together. I should have done that earlier, but because now I might have changed it a little bit, but we'll see. But we got ceramic ball bearings in phosphor bronze cages, 9 ball bearings. So not super high end, not like the Skiff ones, Skiff ball bearings, Skiff Works ball bearings that I'm trying out. We've got a captured stop pin, but it's enclosed. It's not open on the front. I really prefer that. If you got a captured stop pin, I prefer if it's closed like this. So that's really good. And then we've got a steel bar in here helping out the wood. Also helps reduce the weight a little bit because wood's lighter than steel. And there's the lanyard pin back there that I didn't talk about either because I rarely use lanyards, but I really prefer these kind of lanyard pins so that if somebody wants to use one, they can, but there's no big hole in the side of the blade for the rest of us. And here's the screws. None of them have any Loctite on them or anything. Just one other thing before I put it back together again. You can see on the wood side, there's just a tiniest little bit of lubrication where those ball bearings were supposed to be. And maybe a tiniest hint of it. There you go. You can see it glinting off there. So there was some lubrication in there, but I'm going to change it out and put in some Gunny Glide as well. But first, I'm going to test it with the existing lube to see if changing this helped at all. The couple things I missed, or the few things I missed. This wood, it's pretty good, except for if I turn it right, you can sort of see there's a lighter section here. That's because the light's reflecting the rough surface there. I'll probably be fixing that myself, so there's that. I didn't show you the detent before. The detent's a little softer now because I did soften it with that tiny little bit of movement of this. Now, I've got a 3-part series on how to fix detent issues, and all the details about what I did there in more detail is in those videos, so do look at that up if you want that. So the detent was a little bit too strong because now, without moving my wrist at all, I can deploy the blade fully, just pulling back on the flipper tab. So that's improved. And it also means it shuts a little more smoothly too. It doesn't shut super smoothly still, but it does shut more smoothly than it did before. It feels smoother to the touch. You know, the detent was just a little bit too strong. So I got that all dialed in the way I want. But there's still another problem, and we'll cover that in the measurements right now. The weight of this knife is 108 grams, 3.81 ounces. Factory sharpness, I already told you, was pretty bad. 250 bests. I did get over 300 on one of my tests. The cutting edge length, 84.5 millimeters, 3.33 inches. Blade length, tip to the closest spot on the handle, is 87.5 millimeters, 3.45 inches, so just under 3.5-inch blade. The thickness of the blade stock, 2.94 millimeters, 0.116 of an inch, so just slightly under 1/8 of an inch. That's okay. Blade depth this way, it's widest right where my fingertips are, 24.7 millimeters, 0.973 of an inch. How thick is it behind the grind? For this area, it's pretty much the same, and it gets a little thinner at the tip. 0.5 millimeter for most of this, which is about 19.5 thousandths of an inch. You get down to 17 thousandths of an inch up here, so just a little bit under 0.5 millimeter thick up here. Grind angles, that's the other big problem. This side's got an average grind angle of 28.9 degrees, so almost 29 degrees on this side. This side's got a grind angle of 28.6 degrees. Again, almost 29 degrees. At the heel, 31.8 degrees. By the tip, 25.6 degrees. 6.2 degrees of change along the length. That's pretty bad. This side started at the heel at 30 degrees and went to 27.8 degrees up here. 2.2 degrees of change on this side. So that means at the heel, right there, we've got an angle of 61.8 degrees. Try cutting through stuff with 61.8 degrees. Yeah, no wonder it doesn't work that well. At the tip, it's 53.4 degrees total. This is not a unique problem with Civivi. Every single knife brand that I've reviewed have had knives that are similar to this. Maybe not quite this bad, but similar kind of problem with bad sharpening. It's just a very, very common thing. Back to the dimensions here. The length of the handle here, 114.6 millimeters, 4.51 inches. The grip area, in between my thumbs right there, it's over 9 centimeters, a little over 3.5 inches. So you got lots of grip area in here. The thickness of the handle from the handle scales on each side, not counting screws or other protrusions, 10.8 millimeters, 0.425 of an inch. So it's fairly thin knife. The handle depth right here is pretty much the same width. Well, let's do it on this side because this is wider. Right here is pretty much the same width as back here at the very widest point. And that is 23.3 millimeters, which is 0.917 inches. When the knife is closed, the widest point is not here, it's right here. 30.5 millimeters, 1.2 inches. And the total length of this knife, 202 millimeters, 7.95 inches. What's the price of this knife? At White Mountain Knives, most of them are $63.75, but you save 10% with coupon code CCE. That makes it $57.38 American, which is about $79 Canadian on Tuesday, the 14th of March, 2023. In Canada, Blades Canada is the place to get these. Integrity Knives doesn't have it. They've got some of them for $86.99. That's like $7, $8 more than it is in the United States. But they've got one of them, weirdly, $97.99. That's the one with the brown micarta and the black wash blade. But they don't have the wooden version one. So now I've sharpened it. There's a lot more edge showing there now. That's because the angle is shallower. It also means now the thickness behind the grind is thicker because it's moved up the blade, and the blade keeps getting thicker and thicker the closer you get to the spine, right? So even if you move just a tiny bit, but it's not terrible. It cuts well, it slices well, it's a decent cutter, and it's an excellent piercing knife, you know, with this thin edge up here as well. It's not super thin along the spine, but it's thin, and really does help it out an awful lot. And now that I've also got the Gunny Glide in here as well, the detent's still, you know, okay. Now I feel like I want to make it a little stronger, and I probably will. You don't want to adjust it strong and weak too many times. That's just not good. But I can flick it from the bottom now. I'll totally deploy the blade that way if I want to. I'm doing it upside down so you can see, you know, I can do that. It's much smoother than it was, a lot smoother than it was. And this is with the existing ball bearings, like the factory ball bearings. I didn't change the skiff ball bearings in here yet. So yeah, it can be fixed if you know a little bit about what you're doing. So thanks a lot for watching. Thanks for liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. Let me know if you've got one. Really, let me know if you got one, what you think. And remember, friends, always cut towards your chum, not your thumb.